Hello, my name is Jen Bolster. I'm an advanced care paramedic and paramedic practice leader with the Department of Clinical Governance and Professional Practice. I'm here today to provide some information on a new alternative destination pathway for paramedics who are working in Nelson and who are seeing people in the out-of-hospital setting who have experienced a drug poisoning and who would not like to be conveyed to the emergency department. I'll begin by providing a little bit of background, and that's to say that paramedics across the province are attending an unprecedented incidence of drug poisoning events every single day, and Nelson community has been not immune to that. What we saw when we looked at some data in June was that there were days where 50% of all calls for that day were represented by drug poisoning events or CARD 23 events. And in fact, there was one day where 3/4 of all 911 calls that day were drug poisoning events. We also look at a couple of other metrics when we're considering the development of new pathways. And one of the things we look at for this patient population specifically is the incidence of non-conveyance to the emergency department, which has been on the rise since 2015 when the public health crisis was first announced. In the interior region specifically, approximately 65% of people are not being conveyed to the emergency department following a drug poisoning event. And this is concerning given what we know about mortality, and that's that people who are not conveyed to the emergency department after a drug poisoning are at much higher risk for short, medium, and long-term mortality. So the onus is really on paramedic organizations and out-of-hospital providers to be able to provide alternative care pathways that don't necessitate emergency department conveyance. That's where all things like alternative destination pathways come in. This is an important alternative to taking a person to the emergency department where they might not necessarily want to go, or leaving them very uncomfortably on scene in acute opioid withdrawal. So I'll give you a little bit of information on the sites themselves. And so just to make sure it's delineated that there are two different sites here, but they're both under the Anchors organization umbrella. Both of the sites offer designated space for safe drug use, as well as on-site monitoring for people who are at risk of experiencing drug poisoning. And the staff that monitor are all volunteers who are highly experienced in responding to and reversing a drug poisoning. They also offer the distribution of harm reduction supplies, such as take-home naloxone kits. And they are also able to connect people in with services such as opioid agonist therapy, treatment, peer support, and more. All staff are trained in first aid, CPR, and overdose prevention, as well as reversal and response. And above all, the sites provide a safe, stigma-free, and supportive environment for people to be able to spend their time and use drugs safely. I'm going to provide a link to a video in the comments that I recommend you all watch. It's very short, gives a little bit more information on the site itself, and will help integrate the pathway into your practice. So I'll talk a little bit about the pathways themselves now, and just to recall that there are two different sites, therefore two different addresses with slightly different operating hours. So it's just important that you make sure you're looking at the operating hours and making sure that they're open and that you're able to actually convey a person to the site before offering it to your patient. There are some inclusion and exclusion criteria, and these were decided upon collaboratively between the site themselves and BCEHS clinical practice. And these criteria were approved through our clinical governance committees through clinical and professional practice. So for a person to be eligible for the pathway, they need to be at least 19 years of age, and they need to be able to ambulate and follow commands. It needs to be a person who's had their drug poisoning reversed in the out-of-hospital setting, and they need to be refusing conveyance to the emergency department. So just to stress, if a person would prefer to go to the emergency department, they are not eligible for this pathway, and they should be taken to the ED. To be eligible, vital signs also need to be within normal parameters, and you need to make sure that we're checking blood glucoses to make sure that those are also within normal limits. If those are all met, a person is eligible for enrollment in the pathway. A person is not eligible or not suitable for this pathway if they are in acute alcohol withdrawal, if they have unstable vital signs, if they're experiencing severe agitation or severe obtundation, if a person has new injuries or other acute medical needs, or if a person is in acute mental health crisis. So I'll walk you through the process. begins with ensuring that the person is eligible for the pathway, and that includes running through the inclusion and exclusion criteria. From there, paramedics need to make sure that they're obtaining consent from the patient to convey them to the overdose prevention site. From there, paramedics will need to call the site, and the phone number is listed within the handbook under each site to make sure that the site has the capacity and the abilities to be able to accept that person to the site for monitoring. Once that phone call is made and the site accepts the person into their site, the paramedic can then convey the person to the site. It's really important that this entire process is documented, and I'll walk you through the documentation process now. It's important to know that Siren is currently going through an update, and the workflow will change ever so slightly once that update occurs early to mid-December 2023. Currently, to document the pathway, under disposition, you will select transported by this BCEHS ambulance. Under incident, you will input the address to the overdose prevention site. Now, this may auto-populate from CAD, as you will be able to select the site and address within CAD. That said, if it doesn't auto-populate, just type in the address to the site. Under destination type, select other and type in overdose prevention site. And then the reason for choosing destination will be special resource center. Now, if the destination does not auto-populate in from CAD, you will have to override the destination mandatory. When you override it, just type in the free text that you used Alternative Destination Pathway Overdose Prevention Site. This will change slightly after the Siren update in early December. You'll still select transported by this BCEHS ambulance under disposition. But when you select the incident, the sites will actually live within Siren itself. And so you won't have to worry about it auto-populating, and you won't have to worry about overriding any mandatory. Both of the sites will come up and you'll have the option to select either one, and then that address will be auto-populated once you select that site. You'll still select other as the destination type, and you'll still type in overdose prevention site. And you'll still select special resource center for choosing the destination. Now, a future update in around spring 2024, we'll see a change to this workflow further. We'll make sure we communicate that ahead of time so you're well aware of the changes. In essence, we'll just remove some of the requirements to type in free text, and you'll have the ability to select overdose prevention site as a button within Siren. And that's because we hope to develop more alternative destination pathways in the future. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you have any questions, please reach out to clinicalpractice@bchs.ca. Thank you.